Now, I'm really excited to introduce you to our speakers. First up, we have Wendy Battles, who is the host of Reinvention Rebels. As a cybersecurity awareness expert at Yale University by day, Wendy Battles pursues her passion for celebrating, illuminating, and elevating midlife and older women by night. As the host of the Reinvention Rebels podcast, Wendy interviews bold and unapologetic women from 50 to 90 who have reinvented themselves later in life to see new possibilities. From traveling solo around the world with a carry-on bag at 60 to penning and publishing a first novel at 62 to launching a modeling career at 72. I want to know that woman's story. These women are fierce and fabulous. Through deep listening and authentic conversation, Wendy uncovers how these extraordinary women have reinvented themselves in interesting and inspiring ways. They prove that any of us can reinvent ourselves at any age or any stage. So welcome, Wendy. I can't wait to start listening to your podcast. And this sounds like kind of like career goals for me. I would love to just talk to fabulous women about what makes them so fabulous and how they got to be that way, which honestly is a large part of what I do anyway, but I'm so jealous. Joining her in conversation is going to be Stela Lupushor. Stella is on a mission to humanize the workplace. She works with the Conference Board's Fortune 500 corporations members on rethinking their workplace strategies. She leads Reframe.work Inc. and consults on inclusive workplace design, HR, and analytics strategies with amazing.community. This is a nonprofit expanding the work horizon for women 45 and over. Previously, Stella transformed the workplace at the intersection of technology, analytics, and HR at Fidelity Investments, TIAA, IBM, Pricewaterhouse, and PwC Consulting, as well as their clients. So welcome, Stella and Wendy. I cannot wait to hear the conversation y'all are about to have. So I'm going to turn the stage over to you. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Meg. And I am really delighted to have this conversation with Wendy. Wendy, when first time we talked, I just couldn't stop listening to your voice. And then through the conversation, I think I realized that it's not only the power of your own voice that you have, but you also give voice to so many other women and so many other rebels. And the word rebel, it's such a perfect description of everything you do. So can you tell a little bit more to the audience? How did you come up with this idea, and how did you come up with the name, and like how did you pivot yourself and reinvent it to get to this point?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. It is a pleasure to be here in this conversation with you, Stella. I just adore you, and I'm so excited. And just really, I want to welcome everyone to our conversation who's watching and listening. And so that's a great question you asked to start us off. How did I even get started? How did Reinvention Rebels even come about? And I'll tell you it in this way. It came about as a whisper, literally. I was meditating one day, as I do, and I simply heard the two words, Reinvention Rebels. I was like, reinvention what? Reinvention Rebels. Well, if I've learned anything in my 56 years, is that when I hear some type of wisdom from within, I now know to write it down. So I literally just wrote this down, not knowing what it meant. I will tell you that a few months before, I had been asked to be on a panel at Yale for our future leaders of Yale. It was about personal branding. And I started studying up, and I love podcasts. So I started listening to this podcast called Package Your Genius. And the idea behind Package Your Genius is that there is something that we all shine at. Now, you may not even know what it is yet. Maybe you're still trying to figure it out, because it took me 54 years to figure out what I really shine at. I had some ideas, but it all kind of came together. So as being part of this panel and listening to this podcast, I just started really thinking about, what am I meant to do? I've always felt like there was something I was meant to do, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And so I think that just opened the door to really, I bought this woman's book. I started answering the questions. What do you shine at? What do you love to do? What don't you like to do? What gives you energy? So I was asking myself a lot of those questions. And it was during that time that I was meditating a lot. And that's when I heard these two words, Reinvention Rebels. And, over time, I realized it was a podcast. It wasn't immediate, but over time I was like, I think that's what I'm meant to do.
But I think the podcast is a perfect medium to package your genius. And you not only figured out to transform yourself and your story and how that genius gets lived through and exposed to the humanity, but you are amplifying everybody else's voices and their stories and their reinvention examples, because at the core, we all go through transitions regardless of our age, right? And at the same time, it is the inspirational stories, is these little nuggets and introspection that we go into to create and reimagine what that next might look like. So I really love this kind of a meta change and transformation that you pursued. So when you start looking at your profile, and it's Reinvention Rebels, it's the podcast, it's the cybersecurity. And as for everyone listening, if you want to have a career for the foreseeable future, cybersecurity is the space. There is so much demand, there's so much interest, there's so much lack of talent that is necessary. So shout out for anyone who is interested or is pursuing a career in that space. It's in demand. You've done a lot of things. It cannot have been an easy ride. What are some of the things along the way and the transitions that you've gone through that made you to pursue some of these interests, as well as kind of be this container for others' transformation stories?
Such a good question. And to be honest with you, I've been through many transitions in my career. I will say that I don't feel like my career was so intentional. I know people who know from a young age, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a scientist, whatever those things are. I never really had that. I really didn't know. In college, I changed my major 8 times. They finally said, okay, you have to make a decision. And I chose sociology and anthropology because I wasn't sure what else to do. I got out of college and I wasn't really sure what to do. So I started off working in college admissions. I got into the nonprofit world. But I feel like I spent a lot of my time with one thing leading to the next. And, opportunities presenting themselves, and they were all good things, and it really worked out. But I didn't necessarily start with the intention that I have now. Now I feel like I'm leading my life very intentionally and on purpose. But it took me a long time to evolve into being so intentional. And I think that, so it's definitely been a journey. I've learned a lot of things along the way. I always feel like all the experiences we have are preparing us for other things. So it wasn't for nothing that I had those experiences and I developed skills. But one of the common themes, Stella, that I've had throughout every single job I've ever had, which I think has brought me to the nexus of the podcast, is communicating and speaking. From when I was my first job in college admissions, when I would go and talk to high school students about the college I worked for to try to recruit them, to when I worked for the Special Olympics World Games that were in New Haven, Connecticut, where I live, in 1995, where I talked to all, I recruited people to be host families, to help us with all these delegations that were coming from around the world, to becoming a management consultant, where I did a lot of communicating in lots of different ways, to becoming a voice actor in the 90s, where I was using my voice. And I don't know that I was always good at it because I got fired from some jobs, but there were moments when I really shined, right? Because I think that's also the ebb and flow of life. Sometimes things don't work out, or they work out ultimately to our benefit, but we can't see it in the moment. So what might be a failure is often information we need for the future. So I do feel like there have been many different experiences, even though they were unintentional and not intentional at the beginning, that have led me to this place where I can take all these different skills I have and bring them together in this way where I can be of service to people in such an incredibly joyful way, which is the podcast. Just being able to bring these things out in my natural way with all these different skills I have.
It's interesting. It's almost like for the first part of your career, you were on a search, and you probably had a hunch that your voice and communication and speaking was your genius, but you couldn't believe that could be that easy. It's like, no, there must be more than that. And finally you embraced it and you said, this is it, and I'm going to lean into that. The other interesting thing that comes to mind as you're describing all of these pivots, this is very classical for a lot of women. We make different decisions in a different way. And had you stuck with whatever was the initial job after the graduation, maybe you would have been in a very different trajectory. But you expanded your breadth. You searched for what are the new skills, what are the new things that you can add to your portfolio to make yourself better prepared for whatever is coming next. And it takes some resilience. It takes a certain mindset. And I think it's very easy to fall into some of the societal norms and thinking about the women not negotiating, not asking for the promotion, not sticking with one path. And I think you're a perfect embodiment of a different kind of pathway that a lot of women pursue and need to be acknowledged and recognized by the society as, bringing a breadth of talent, not just a resume with multiple line items that kind of may not necessarily perfectly fit together. But it takes also a huge amount of courage to be that way. And like, what is it? What is the magic sauce? What are the, what is the mindset that you had to have that courage to make these pivots? Because these are not easy. You kind of start over every single time you decide to make a jump.
Oh gosh, what is the secret sauce? I love that question. And I think of the secret sauce for me, especially now with Reinvention Rebels, I talk about this and I see this in my own life as what I call the 3 C's. My secret sauce is the 3 C's. It is curiosity, courage, and commitment. Curiosity, courage, and commitment. So to create this mindset that you're referring to, Stella, of this openness, of possibility, I think it starts with being curious. It starts with being curious about the world around us, the people around us. I see this in the women I interview. It's people that ask questions, that they're people that are lifelong learners, people that are interested in expanding their horizons in some way, even if they're not even sure how, right? We often don't know the how. Maybe we have a what or a why in our mind. Why? Because I'd like to do something different. So there might be a simple why, and just having that spirit of curiosity, I think is one part of that secret sauce. You talked about courage and how do you build courage? And when I look back and I think sometimes I was so scared when I did things, but I did them anyway. And I think that spirit comes from just taking baby steps. It's not trying to figure out like everything at one time, but just trying to make a small step forward. I always think I like to be perfectly imperfect. I think women are so stuck right on being perfectionists and getting everything right and not having anything out of line. And, we just want to be so good at what we do that we sometimes stop ourselves because we're really stuck in, I won't do it unless it's perfect. And I think that, when we have courage, we just try it. Yeah. And we're often trying it imperfectly. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't at all, but there's a lesson in that. So I think that when we're willing to be perfectly imperfect, and step out with a little bit of courage, we can build that courage muscle over time. So then the next thing doesn't seem like such a big deal to take maybe a leap of faith. Because I will say that my biggest gains have been when I've been willing to take a risk. When I've been, taking that risk, something great has happened and it's always been worth it. So it's the curiosity, it's the courage. And then the final thing I talk about in my secret sauce is commitment. That we need to be committed to ourselves. And by commitment, I mean, it's commitment to me plus living on purpose, that intention we talked about, and having passion about what we're doing. So that if we decide that I am worth it and it is worth me investing in my time. So for me, that means I get up every morning at 4:45. So that I can work on the podcast because I love it so much. I'm so passionate about it. It is me living on purpose, which then when those things are in alignment for me, curiosity, courage, and commitment, then things unfold and they don't have to be so hard. I've spent a lot of time in my life making things so much harder than they have to be. And I've realized that we can, work towards something, but then if we kind of let go and allow things to unfold also while taking action, that, naturally things happen that work, in our favor. And I think that that's, to me, is the key of those three things working together: curiosity, courage, and commitment. So that is my secret sauce.
I want to add one more C to that list: compassion. I think when it comes to allowing things to work out, there is a degree of tolerance for error and mistakes, because many times that shows up. And when we try to control too much, I think that's when we have a discrepancy, a gap in expectation versus what the result is. And what you're talking about is really allowing the messiness of life happen, because there is a golden nugget in that. And the more you beat yourself, the more difficult it is to have the courage for the next thing or make that commitment. Any particular tricks that helped you overcome some of the challenges and what some people may call failures, but these are all lessons and learning opportunities, of course. How did you cope with those?
Well, first I want to say I totally agree with you with that 4C, compassion. Absolutely. We need to be gentle with ourselves. We need to offer ourselves grace and appreciate that we're going along this path in just the right way. So I just want to add that in, because I am 100% with you. In terms of lessons that I've learned along the way of how I've overcome challenges, one thing I will say is having role models and mentors and coaches for me has been immensely helpful. And, role models can be larger than life people that you see. So for example, on my vision board, I have Oprah Winfrey. I've got Carla Hall, the chef. I've got all kinds of people who I really look up to, who I do not know Oprah clearly. And I don't think probably most of us on here do. But clearly she's a larger than life person that I admire, who, is like the best of the best. So I think that there are people like that I see as role models that inspire me, who have overcome lots of obstacles. Yeah. Because I think that that's so key, is trying to figure out, how do I do that? And I have my own version of that. So it doesn't mean that what she does is what I'm going to do. But I think it's important to see examples of people that have overcome challenges to remind me that I can overcome my challenges, but in my own way. So I think that's important. I also think, I like to be inspired, because inspiration really sparks something in me. So for me, it could be asking people, my circle of family, friends, colleagues, who do you know that's overcome something? Tell me a story about someone that that's overcome something, and let me see what I can glean from that situation that I can apply to my own life. I also like looking at TED Talks. I like looking at YouTube videos, things again that inspire me and just remind me about what's possible, because there's this like societal narrative about so many things and it's this way. But then there's also the narrative about people every day are overcoming obstacles and doing amazing things. And that's where I like to live. I like to live in this space of what is possible, not what the limitations are, because all limitations can be exceeded, changed. So to me, it's all about, how can I find people or things that will inspire me to see what's possible. And that is what helps me overcome the challenges I face.
And indeed, if we look at the world around us, there's so much that can inspire us to say, look, our life are not that bad. It could be a lot worse. So let's lean into whatever is positive and step from there, as opposed to trying to think of what doesn't work. Yeah. I love this. So your podcast participants, I listened to a bunch of them and they are just mind-blowing. And they are, it's like, talk about stories of overcoming challenges and reimagining yourself. Every single one has a lot of that wisdom. How, are there any particular interviews that are really memorable? Any particular stories that you said, oh my gosh, that was the best one? Is there a favorite one? I know it's like asking, do you have a favorite child? But
it's almost impossible to answer. And every time I do an interview and I release a new episode, I think this is my favorite one. Because first of all, these women are all brilliant and exceptional. So I think that's the first thing. And just the idea of being able to celebrate, illuminate, and elevate women fills my heart with joy, especially older women, because we celebrate younger women in our society. That is what is seen as like ideal, but the light is not, we don't shine the light on midlife and older women in the same way. So that, number one, is awesome. But in terms of who are my favorites, well, I'll tell you a few, but the first person I have to say that is my all-time favorite, just because her story is so extraordinary, is 74-year young Carolyn Doling. And you can actually go Google her. She was on the Today Show a couple months ago with this really great story. But basically, Carolyn felt like when she got to her 70s that she was becoming invisible. And that when she wore bright colors, that it led to more social engagement. Because you're not in the workplace anymore. You're not just having the kind of interactions that we kind of take for granted when we're working, that kind of go away sometimes when you retire or you're less busy. So true. Anyway, what I think is extraordinary is that through a series of different circumstances, Carolyn became a model at 72. Now, first of all, most of us are never going to become models, period. Right? And there are all these things about what a model looks like. And I love this because Carolyn is, she's vertically challenged, she's African-American, she's older and has white hair, all kinds of things that are not what in our society we see as typically beautiful, yet she became a model. And I think it's a great story. I really encourage you all to listen to this episode, and listen to all of them, but listen to this one, especially because it's just such a lesson in anything is possible. And we can create anything we want, that, no matter the circumstances. So I just found that to be really wonderful and so inspiring. Like, she is so incredibly inspiring about, what she's doing. And so, she's at 74 now, she's modeling, she's getting more and more work. Her goal is to model on the runway, because she does a lot of print ads and that kind of thing, which is like extraordinary.
Impressive. But, there are a couple of other nuggets in what you're saying. She is redefining the standards for beauty, right? And back to the role model comment you made earlier, we need role models. We need images. We need examples of representing the age, not as something that, happens right before you die or you need medical assistance. And I think we have to reimagine how we visualize, how we portray how beautiful age can be and what is beauty even at that same time.
Exactly. And I think that, it opens up such a huge opportunity for all of us to think differently, right, about our bodies. Because everyone is so into anti-aging, like, I don't want to age, but there's so much wisdom in appreciating who we are, how far we've come, how we look as we age. Is not a bad thing. Like, I'm all about, let's appreciate what we have, that we can walk, that we can run, that we can do all the things that we can do. And yes, sometimes our bodies change as we age, but so what? Like, we are still so capable. So so you're right. It's totally redefining what beauty is. And, she's very intent on trying to change the image of older people, of people of color that are modeling, and so on just so many different levels. It's really inspiring. I love that. I mean, there's so many other people that have been great. One of them is Kelly, who at 53 started a new career as a photographer. And I was just part over the weekend of this big exhibit, because she is focused on photographing women over 50. So it's her 50 over 50 photo campaign to really shine a light and help women love the skin they're in as we age, which I think is so key. And I just thought it was such a great story of how she went from being a teacher to now just finished teaching and full-time at 53 is working on this new career. So I think that, at any age, it reminds me that at any age or any stage, we can reimagine our lives, we can restart, we can have what I call a do-over, we can embrace the notion of do-overs. Nothing is forever. And so whether we're in our 20s and we're just thinking about our careers, or we're mid-career, or we're older, I feel like it's never, ever too late. That's what these women teach me. It's never, ever too late. There's always so much possibility. Another one I'll mention, because there's so many, I can't mention them all. But I love Natalie. So Natalie is 61, and Natalie retired early at 59. At 60, she traveled around the world for her first trip ever, solo travel around the world with one suitcase, which was her carry-on bag, by herself.
Wow.
And she never traveled by herself before. So it's a big deal to kind of say, well, my first solo trip is going to be around the world for 70 days. I thought that was really extraordinary what she did. And she also has reinvented herself. So now she's back. She's going to retire to Portugal, which is one of my dreams. I want to retire to Portugal. And what she's doing now, though, she loves bourbon. So she proposed to this bourbon distillery in Cleveland, where she lives, her reimagined apprenticeship. So she's doing this bourbon apprenticeship, learning how to make it and doing all of these different tasks at 61. And again, a great example of, we can always start fresh. We can have new ideas if we are open to the possibility, if we give ourselves permission to dream and to think bigger. Why not? Why shouldn't we think really, really big about our lives and pursue whatever those dreams are, no matter what our age?
Well, you already look like you're in Portugal, given that background. So you just have a little more to add the waves and things in motion. It is so fascinating. And since we're talking about the age and all of these stories of reinvention, there's something about the societal norms that typically expect as we get older to kind of slow down and retire and move into the sunset. But all your stories are really about blooming. It almost, exploding, finally finding that genius and channeling it and allowing it to improve the world in a positive way. How might we rethink these societal norms? And is there something that we, each of us individually, can redefine the reinvention pathway or timeline or stage, as you described?
Well, I think that we can, redefine ourselves starting today. I think that we can, use that curiosity factor that many of us have to just start thinking about, well, what is it I really want? I mean, if I could do anything, what would it be? Because I don't think it means always like we have to quit our job to pursue our dreams. Like I love my day job. I love working in cybersecurity. And I'm not a technical person. I mean, I do communication kinds of things in this role in cybersecurity. So again, that goes back to that prior conversation of this theme throughout my life about being a powerful communicator and using that for good, to be of service to people. And I think that we can figure out, wherever I am right now in this moment, let me take a step back and just reflect on, who do I want to be? What do I want to be? And how can I make some steps? Even if I've got a full-time job and I'm doing whatever I'm doing, but I have other interests, hence full-time job plus podcast. In what way could I pursue that? Who could I talk to that could help me down that path? How can I go to an amazing.community event with Stella and get some inspiration? So I think it's kind of thinking about, what would some of those things be? How can I think maybe a little bigger? How can I just get started in small ways? Because I just, I've been dabbling. So I get up really early and I work after work, and I do interviews at night, and I make it work. But I think that but I think it all goes back to, Stella, this idea of purpose and passion.
Yeah.
that when we are living on purpose and we have passion for something, because I had a lot of other jobs that I wasn't necessarily passionate about back in the day. And well, yes, they paid the bills and they were good jobs and I was good at them, but I didn't necessarily have passion for it. So I think that to me, that's really the key, is figuring out what is it you love to do. And in what way can you do that? Because I'll tell you, I've also had a lot of fails. Many years ago, I really didn't like my job, and I really was really interested in health, and I became a health coach, and I was coaching people, and I was working with women, which I loved doing, but I didn't really love coaching. I know people love to coach, and I like to coach people like my friends just for fun, but not like as a business. And I felt really like a failure because I quit my job, my well-paying corporate job, to do this. And then I realized, I don't think this is it. And then I felt really bad. Like this should have been like the thing, and it wasn't. And I think that's where we need to offer ourselves some grace along this path of self-discovery. Not every single thing we're going to do is going to be the thing. Or sometimes we have these crazy high expectations that I feel like, you put all this energy into it, and then you feel disappointed if it doesn't work out the way we want. But it goes back to all of those things, I think, are points of data that are helping move us in the direction. Because I learned a lot from doing that before, how I'm doing it differently now with the podcast. And that, like even social media, like I've learned so much about that. Also, I was a voiceover actor back in the 90s. And then I stopped doing it, and I started doing it again, like in the, 2018. But I just didn't have the passion for it. And I kept thinking, I want to use my voice for good in some way, but just doing ads for people's businesses isn't it for me. Like there wasn't any joy in that for me. There wasn't any passion in that for me. And when I started to put together these ideas of, I love working with women, I love empowering women, I have this great voice and I want to use my voice for good. When I got to the point of putting that together, like that's a podcast, that's when the lights went off for me. And I realized that's how I live on purpose. That's living, with passion. But it took me 54 years to figure this out. So it's just not, so that's why I think we have to start small, use those little things that work and don't work as test cases, and grow from there.
And I think there is another, not to belabor on the topic of mindset, but there is a lot of norms that we comply with, and then we think, well, but what if I fail? So we never give ourselves permission to even give it a try. And even when we do fail, we feel really guilty. We feel, beaten down, and we're not going to try anymore. So by the time we get to a midlife, our world shrinks, and we kind of not give ourselves permission. And in essence, what you're saying is, doesn't matter what the society expects, what it says, it's really an inner job at the core of it.
Yes.
All right. So all of this is so inspirational and so positive. And some people may say, well, but you're lucky, you had the education, you had the job, you had all the privileges that some people perceive they are privileges. There is something to be said about kind of organizations as well as practices that we see in the work environment, as well as just general sense that ageism is one of those last isms to be acknowledged. I think we look at age as something to fight, or something to address, something to deal with. We don't necessarily look at it as something to embrace. And I still haven't figured out if there is a perfect age in life. It feels like for a big chunk of your time, you're too young for, especially in the work environment, and then you're too old suddenly. It's probably just one day that you're perfect age. How might we deal with ageism and just the societal attitude? Is it really changing the media narrative? Is it changing the workplace practices? Is it changing just our internalized ageism? How many times are we saying, I'm dating myself? What are some of the angles that we can tackle this topic?
Well, that's a brilliant question. And I think it's many different things. I think it's many of the different things that you said. And one thing I'm thinking is that it is this at a meta societal level. Obviously, we need to create change. And I was thinking about this because I read an article yesterday in my local paper about laws going into effect October 1st in Connecticut. And one of them is it is going to be illegal to ask for someone's age on job applications, employers to do that starting October 1st. So that is that societal change that we're talking about that begins to address ageism, whether you're too young or you're too old, right? Or anywhere in between, because sometimes it's a detriment when you're young and you put your age down and people think you don't have enough experience. So it works both ways. But I do think that, part of it is what we say to ourselves. And I think instead of thinking about how our age can limit us, I'd like to think of it as how can I use my age as an asset? In what ways can I use all of this great experience I have? And we all have experiences that we can use to our benefit, no matter our circumstances, whether we're younger or older or somewhere in between. So that's the question I ask myself. In what way can I use age as an asset? What are the organizations that welcome that? Because there are organizations, it's not that every organization is against people that are older, but sometimes it's finding the right fit. It's finding those organizations, and it's not always obvious, right? So sometimes we have to really work at that to find it. So I think it's that combination of my own personal mindset. How can I open my mind? How can I leverage this and see this as a benefit? And so what if 10 organizations say you're too old and you're not qualified? It's like people that write books. They say they were rejected 50 times or 100 times, but it was the 101st publishing house that said, yes, we're going to publish your book. So I think you mentioned resilience. This is about being resilient and persevering and always knowing that even if there are a ton of no's, you will get to somebody that says yes.
And again, I think it's also how you show up, right? Because if you tell yourself that you may not be accepted because of your age, you're going to show up that way. And I think that always gets in the way. A lot of times in interviews, even in resumes, the energy comes across, even if it's a written way of describing yourself and what you do and how you've done it. It's really about the shaping that narrative as opposed to putting yourself in a specific age bracket.
Yes.
What's the other interesting thing is we think about age in terms of how marketing targets us, right? In terms of the brackets we belong to or generations we attribute ourselves to. But let's face it, with the longevity and extending our health and lifespan, we have another, 30, 40 years in us past the, midlife point. There is so much that not only we can do in the workplace and work environment to support teams, to support managers, to bring that maturity, to bring that collaboration, project management, being able to keep multiple balls in the air, but also create our own new venture that allows us to exhibit that passion and that courage and that commitment and have an impact. I do think that voices like yours deserve its own podcast, not only to share the stories of others, but for you to do the inspiring part, because you have so many parts of it. And it's like a disco ball with multiple mirrors that shine lights on different aspects of just what it's like to be a human and how thriving looks like. So for those who would like to learn more about your work, how are they able to find you, and where can they follow you as soon as we're done with this call? Not before.
I love it. So many different ways. So first of all, my podcast, Reinvention Rebels, is available on every podcast platform. So you can look it up, you can Google it, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, etc. You can follow me. I share a lot of inspiration, especially on Instagram at Reinvention Rebels is my name on there. And I'm always posting all kinds of things to help people think about reinvention and pro-aging and possibility. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Wendy Battles, and I share all kinds of stuff there too. A lot also about cybersecurity. So lots of different, and on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Rebels Reinvent. So lots of different ways, and I would love to connect with all of you. So by all means, reach out.
And reinvent yourself. Be the rebel that you've always dreamed about.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
My
and thank you,
pleasure.
Power to Fly, for giving the opportunity to share this story and highlight the voice.
Thank you so much. This has been such an incredible pleasure and honor.
Thank you so much, both of you. Huge thanks to both Stella and Wendy. That was a great conversation. I'm so happy I got to sit in on it. I just want to say a huge thank you to you both for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. Thank you.